I look out at what's happening on college campuses and I see the anger and I get it. But what I wish I could tell people is that it's worth the discomfort, it's worth listening, and that we're stronger, not weaker, because of it.
Zachary Wood came to national attention a few years ago when he was a student at ultra-liberal Williams College. And the student group that he helped lead was pressured to cancel its invitation to Suzanne Venker, a conservative author and critic of feminism. Wood was accused of causing actual mental, social, psychological, and physical harm to his fellow students, and paying for the continued dispersal of violent ideologies that kill our black and brown trans femme sisters. In his memoir, Uncensored, My Life in Uncomfortable Conversations at the Intersection of Black and White America, Wood writes about the need for civil discourse and open debate, especially on college campuses. This self-described liberal Democrat says his commitment to dialogue comes from dealing with his mother's mental illness, his frequent moves as a child, and being a black scholarship student at mostly white, wealthy schools. Zach, thanks for talking.
Thanks for having me.
You became a public figure because you joined a group called Uncomfortable Learning at Williams College, in one of the most prestigious undergraduate liberal arts schools. Describe what Uncomfortable Learning was and why you got into trouble.
So Uncomfortable Learning was a student group on campus that had the goal of inviting speakers to campus with views that did not align with the majority of students and professors, right? Williams is predominantly liberal. I'd say my rough estimate would be about 80% of the student body is liberal. And so the idea of Uncomfortable Learning was to broaden the range of political discourse on campus by inviting speakers who were on the right, and inviting speakers with provocative viewpoints.
And this included a woman who was kind of an anti-feminist, a conservative anti-feminist, John Derbyshire, formerly of National Review.
Exactly, who was disinvited.
That's right. And what's the value of bringing in that kind of viewpoint?
So for me, the way I see it, if students are supposed to go out into the world and be prepared to advocate for the issues that they care about and to seek social change and so forth, and to be contributing members of society, they have to know how to articulate differences of opinion. They have to know how to handle moral and political disagreements. And I think that starts with having the kind of education that prepares you to say, this is what I think, but I'm not just going to tune out those who see things differently.
Your memoir is really fascinating. Explain how that that realization that you had, how does that come out of your life experience?
So I grew up with a mother who had a mental illness. And so that forced me to be very empathetic, understanding, and open at an early age. Because when you're younger, you don't even really understand what schizophrenia means and what it entails. What you know is that there are many mood fluctuations, and so you have to kind of open yourself up to trying to understand what your parent is going through. In addition, I moved around a lot, and I started going to private schools in 4th grade. And I was coming from a disadvantaged community, going to a school in a more affluent area, and that meant that I had to be open to talking and making friends with peers who came from very different backgrounds.
Right, and oftentimes, you talk about they were kind of projecting stereotypes on you,
yes,
but
right.
You also had stereotypes about them.
Exactly, right, yeah, it went both ways. And so part of what that experience sort of challenged me to do was to assess those stereotypes and to try to make an effort on my part to kind of resist the inclination to make them.
So one of the people that you invited who actually did get to show up was Charles Murray,
right.
the AEI scholar who wrote The Bell Curve, as well as Coming Apart, a number of books. And you describe a dinner or a conversation that you had with him, which I thought was really interesting because you don't necessarily agree with him, but you felt that you benefited from that conversation. Can you kind of rehearse that and explain why that was a good thing, why that's like an exemplary moment of what you're trying to do?
For one, so you have the fact that I disagree with the argument. I think intelligence is something that's complicated,
right.
And to base it off of one test or one metric, I think is never the way to go. At the same time, Charles Murray has influence. His book, Coming Apart, speaks to a number of social issues and how we should address them. And it's my view that if we want to understand whether it's the 2016 election or various segments of the American population that might agree with those views, engaging with someone like that face-to-face gives you the opportunity to ask questions, tough questions, to challenge, to say, here's where I disagree, and also to say, what is the evidence that your beliefs are based on? And I think that with that understanding, you're then better enabled to make the arguments that you do believe.
Did he convince you of anything after that conversation that you didn't agree with going in?
No, there was not much he persuaded me on. One thing he did say with respect to some of the negative effects of government assistance, I could see where he was coming from with some of it, and so I think there has to be a measured and balanced approach.
How do you define yourself politically? Because are you liberal, are you conservative, are you libertarian, are you none of those things?
I'm a liberal Democrat, and there are many progressive causes I support, but I was not a Bernie supporter. I was a Hillary supporter.
Well, so would she have been protested at Williams as being too centrist?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I think there were a lot of fans. She had a lot of fans.
You know, you're kind of a generational spokesperson. You know, you're a college grad who has written an interesting memoir, and you've had an interesting experience where people at Williams College really kind of hated you because you were dragging people like John Derbyshire or Charles Murray or, to campus. Why do you think your generation seems to be particularly upset at the idea of entertaining a wide range of viewpoints or viewpoints that they disagree with?
I think there are a number of factors. One is that you have social media at work. The way in which it kind of mobilizes certain biases, it can easily galvanize people around something, whether it's a bias incident on campus or anything that takes place. I think that's one factor. Another factor is the way media works in general in our society. We're focused on sound bites and clickbait often and things that promote and push dominant narratives, right? The narratives that we're most familiar with. And so I think it reinforces certain biases. Another factor in some sense, and I think this is under-discussed, is that it was in some sense the logical next step, even though I have criticisms of it, for progressives on campus, which is to say, if in the 80s and the 90s the goal was to increase diversity, to have more minorities on campus, well, the next step is going to be make sure everybody feels welcome, make sure everyone feels included. The issue is that can come into tension with having free expression on campus. Why? Because if you have a speaker and someone says, I don't feel welcome because this person is speaking here, you see, then you have the issue of political tolerance and social tolerance being in conflict.
Do you feel that, I guess, are you a millennial or a Gen Z?
I think I'm a millennial.
Yeah. Okay, so, or let's, you're younger than me, so fuck you. But beyond that, do you feel like people, like your peers, are not as resilient in terms of dealing with stuff that they're uncomfortable with?
I do. I think it's a fair characterization, but I want to be careful there because I think there are adults in the room who are responsible in some sense for a lot of what's going on here. College administrators, educators, broader trends in our society that we have to account for. So I don't think it's just the case that we've got, immature, intolerant students who are just that way, because of their own doing, right? I think there's a sense in which everyone needs to be held to a higher standard, but especially the leaders of institutions and the ones who are coming up with the ideas, scholars and professors who understand what academia is really about, what scholarship is really about, and what higher education is really about.
Do you think they're getting that message, and is there any sense, as you move from college to the work world, do you have any sense that colleges are going to get more tolerant, or are they going to get more intolerant?
I certainly hope that they will become more tolerant. It's tough to say if that's going to be a broader trend that takes place. I think ultimately things are going to have to improve, because I think that one thing that's happened, even though people disagree on who should be on campus or not, I think most people who have actually taken a good look at the situation see that there is an issue with expression on campus, and a tension between expression and efforts to promote inclusion. And so I think the general recognition of that in a broader sense is one step in the right direction.
Your book is subtitled "Your Life at the Intersection of Race, of Black and White." Do you feel blackness in America is more problematic now, or is it easier? And obviously, you only have your life, but is it easier to be black in America now, or is it getting harder?
I think if you're comparing it to a century ago, even 60 years ago, I think it's better. That's not to say I think there's still considerable progress to be made with respect to race and the way in which it impacts various facets of American life. But I think we've certainly made significant progress.
What kinds of stories will we see from you?
So I'm really interested in two areas in particular. One is inequality and the other is education. With respect to inequality, I really want to look at the conversation in terms of social mobility and economic opportunity, and look at what kinds of things you can do to help more people achieve the American dream, especially those who don't have access and don't have opportunity. Another issue with respect to education, I want to look at achievement gaps, and I want to look at disparities in education between public and private schools, between certain charter schools, especially in under-resourced communities. Mm-hmm. And one thing I'm interested in doing is actually going to some of those schools and talking to teachers and students firsthand and trying to get a sense of what are the challenges they're facing and what do they think would make a difference.
All right, well, we'll look forward to reading those stories. Thank you, Zach Wood. We have been talking with Zach Wood. He's the author of Uncensored, My Life and Uncomfortable Conversations at the Intersection of Black and White America. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.